Hello everyone, it's Ian from Cromford Collector's Corner. I'm here today with a little video for you guys about what makes a comic valuable. So I'm sure to quite a lot of people that are watching this, I am preaching to the converted, but I'm just going to go through some fairly basic stuff about why some comics are worth a lot of money and why some aren't. And we're going to show some examples of things talk about the different reasons why. So a little bit about me. I am a sole trader. I've had my little semi-rural comic shop for this will be my 6th year trading. But I can talk about this stuff to some extent, but there might be things that I miss or forget or miss out. But hopefully this will be interesting and informative for you guys. But forgive me if I forget anything. So there are lots of reasons why some comics are worth more than others. And generally, I'm going to talk about American comics here. And the reason I'm going to talk about American comics is that is where the really, really valuable comics come from. So it's not that there aren't other comics from different nationalities that are worth money. It's not really my area. But I would imagine some first printings of Tintin, for example, from France, will be very valuable. And in terms of British comics, they're nowhere near as valuable as American comics, but there are some that are valuable. I was reading that last year, a copy of Beano #1, which was published in 1938, which was sold in good condition and in really, really nice condition, with its original free gift. And that is extremely rare. I've not really seen that before. It came with a mask, I think. But that sold for £30,000, which obviously is a lot of money. Generally, as a rule, I think Beano #1 without its free gift in kind of mid to low grade is worth between £2,000 and £3,000, maybe up to £5,000. So that £30,000 is a massive leap forward. But as I said, the really, really valuable comics, the $1 million comics or the £50,000 comics or the more, all come from the American comic book scene. So into the other end of the spectrum, and I'm going to talk about this comic a bit as we go along. I don't have an example to show you. But the world's most valuable comic currently is also from 1938, and that was published by DC, and it's Action Comics #1, which was the first appearance of Superman. A very, very high grade copy, an 8.5 out of 10 on the CGC American Comic Book Grading Scale, sold for $6 million. Also last year. So you can see already there's a huge difference between British comics and the most valuable British comic and the most valuable American comic. But interesting that they both come from the same year. I've got some notes here. So we've got, firstly, where the comic comes from. Secondly, how old the comic is. So this does influence, the really valuable comics come from a long time ago. There are comics, and again, we'll talk about it, from more recent times that are valuable. But the really, really valuable ones come from the 60s, really, and before. So there's two ages here I'm not really going to talk about, mainly because it's not really my area. But there are two eras, the Victorian age and the Platinum age, in which comics as we would imagine them today didn't really exist. But we started to see things like Punch and other things like that that happen up to really the beginning of the Second World War. So again, there are comics from that era that are valuable, but it's not my area. But we're going to talk about the American comic scene, as I've said, which starts off, they're all split into different periods. So you have the golden age of American comics, in which we get things like Wonder Woman's first appearance, Captain America's first appearance, Batman, Superman, and some of the really, really iconic characters make their first appearance in the sort of late 30s, early 40s. So that's the golden age of American comics, and that's generally considered to be between 1938 and the sort of mid-50s, 1954, 1955. Then you get the silver age of American comics, which is sort of between the mid-50s and 1970. Also, the silver age of American comics is when we really get a lot of the Marvel comics key issues. So we're talking about Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man. These characters all come about, Avengers, these characters all come about in the silver age of American comics, which, as I said, is between the mid-50s and 1970. Then you get the Bronze Age of American comics between 1970 and 1985, the Copper Age of American comics between 1985 and about 1990, and then what's considered to be currently the Modern Age of American comics, which is from 1990 up to present day. So as I said, the really, really big hitting comics come from basically the Golden and the Silver Age of American comics. There are, however, significantly valuable comics all the way up to really quite modern. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So we've had where they come from, how old they are. The condition of the comic is vital. So, the difference between a low grade and a high grade copy will make an enormous difference on the value of a comic, particularly modern things. So modern comics that are not in great condition generally aren't worth an enormous amount of money. They basically have to be kind of near mint copies to be worth something. The further you go back in time, it certainly matters less, but it does make a difference. So, the 8.5 Action Comics #1, $6 million, is an extremely high grade comic for that era. And there are others around that will sell for significantly less. So generally in Europe, the comic book grading scale goes from kind of poor to near mint. Generally, as a rule, it's quite easy to tell the difference between something that's kind of good to something that's near mint. But the American comic book scale, the CGC comic book scale, which is when you get them in slabbed comics, is a bit more complicated. And again, it's very easy to tell the difference between, they scale out of 10, between 1 and 10. But it's much more difficult to tell the difference between a 9.6 and a 9.8. So in Europe generally we use fine, very fine, near mint, etc. In America generally it's on a points grading scale. We've talked briefly about the difference between pence price copies, cents price copies, newsstand copies, and direct editions, and later still variant covers before. So I'm not going to linger on that too much, but I will provide the link to that video if you want to watch that, and where I talk about the difference. They're all printed in America at the same place at the same time, but some have a pence variant pricing, and some will have a newsstand and a direct edition, which is when you get Captain America Shield or Spider-Man. They weren't available for sale or return. Direct editions will have a barcode. They were available for sale or return and are a little bit more sought after. But we're not going to talk too much about that. So one of the other big factors that involves how valuable a comic is how popular it is. So again, this will affect comics throughout the history of American comics. So, there are certain characters that are and have always been and still are incredibly popular. So, for example, Batman. The very first appearance of Batman, I can't remember the issue number, Detective Comics 38, is it, or something? That's extremely sought after because everyone loves Batman, right? But there are certain characters that have peaked and troughed in popularity. So those can, at one time, can be really valuable, and this later on drop off because that character is no longer sort of fashionable or sought after. As I said, this can happen across the eras. So obviously in the Golden Age, when the sort of late 30s to 50s, you're getting some of these really, really important characters come to the fore. So Superman, Wonder Woman, all these kind of things. But you do get ones that come from later on. So although they're significantly less valuable, they are still valuable. I mean, significantly more than when they were released. So, for example, in 1990, Deadpool, New Mutants 98 came out, and that is the first appearance of Deadpool. And obviously Deadpool, massively popular character, and that's led to that comic is being really sought after and therefore significantly more valuable. To find a near mint copy of that at the moment, you're probably looking at about £250, £300. Yeah, and that has gone up a lot in the last few years, and we'll talk about that as well in a minute. So one of the other things that affects the value of a comic is how available it is. So again, if we're talking about, you know, trying to find a near mint copy of a 1930s comic, it's extremely unlikely. So because of that, that obviously pushes the value of the comic. But when we're talking about modern comics, it'd probably be surprising to some that some comics that are, you know, turn out to be incredibly popular, very long running, spawn TV shows and all this sort of thing, sometimes aren't printed with that many copies, and therefore because there's not many out there, and they're sought after, then it really does rank up the price of the comic. One I would particularly use is The Walking Dead. So The Walking Dead was published, I think, in 2003. Obviously became enormously popular, spawned multiple TV shows, hugely popular series. But The Walking Dead #1, when it was first printed, I do believe there were only 7,266 copies made. So that tells you that there's a lot more Walking Dead fans out there that would like a nice copy of Walking Dead #1 than there are copies of Walking Dead out there, and therefore, you know, it's a seller's market. It really does push the value of that comic. So to find a near mint copy of that currently, and it's 2025 at the moment, you're looking probably about £1,000 to find a near mint copy of that comic. And so that's not very long ago, 22 years ago. Yeah, and it can still be really valuable. I'll touch briefly also on it really does make a massive difference as to when you buy or sell these comics. So the peak and trough of the value of comics has altered massively over the years, and at the moment we are on an enormous high. So I'm going to show you something that hopefully might be quite interesting. So what I've got here is a copy of 1984 Overstreet comic book price guide. It's number 14, and these things become collectible in themselves. I've actually got a few at the moment. Quite interesting. But what's interesting about this is that when we're talking about Action Comics #1, so this was in 1984. It has the way they grade things in here is like you know, poor, fine, and mint. So there's only 3 categories here, but they have a price here, and it does say, oh, the prices on this vary wildly, but it has an estimated price on a mint copy of Action Comics #1, and their recommended price for that in 1984 was $14,000. Now, $14,000 in today's money is about $40,000, in and around there. But and as I said, a copy and 8.5, which is mint, but it's pretty sweet, sold for $6 million. So that shows you how over time these things can make an enormous difference in the value of a comic. So we've gone from being around $40,000 to being $6 million in what, 40 years? Interesting. Comic book price guide. So the one thing that we've not really talked about, and I'm starting to wrap this up now, I'm going to show you some examples of comics that hopefully nicely demonstrate one of the things that we've not talked about, and that is minor key issues and key issues. And by this, I mean comics in which significant events occur. So, for example, in a minor key issue might be the first appearance of a minor character, Whereas a key issue might be the first appearance or the death of a major character, or the contribution of a major artist who then goes on to influence the comic massively in the years to come, or writer, or whatever. So those are quite important things. So I'm going to show you first, we're going to start off with a nice comic that is from the golden age of American comics. It's not a key issue, but it's still a relatively nice thing. So what I have here is a copy of 4-color comics. And it's 4-color 281, Bugs Bunny and the Great Circus Mystery. That's a nice copy. This was published in 1950 by Dell. And Dell at the time were one of the largest comic book publishers in the world and had some very savvy licenses. It's a really, really nice copy. Fine plus, very fine minus. 4-color 281 Bugs Bunny. Mylar there. And that's worth about 30 quid. So it's not enormously valuable, but it's not a key issue, but it is from the golden age, so it's still worth quite a bit of money. But it's not crazy valuable. That's quite cool. So the next one is, these are all Marvel comics I'm going to talk about now. So this is an anniversary issue. This is a copy of Fantastic Four 250. Fantastic Four 250 was published in 1983. Yes. And even though it's an anniversary issue and it's a nice copy, it's not a particularly sought after comic because it's not a key issue or a minor key issue, even though it's an anniversary copy. It's a nice condition comic from 1983. It's worth about a £5. So not a key issue, but an older comic. Well, what's that? We're getting 40 something years ago now. Not particularly valuable, but kind of cool. But yeah, not worth an enormous amount more than it was originally. The next one is a near mint copy from 1988 of X Factor 23. And X Factor 23 was the first comic book appearance of the Horsemen of Apocalypse. And the Horsemen of Apocalypse, and the first cameo of Archangel, who become kind of minor characters within the Marvel canon. This is a lovely Walt Simonson artwork, near mint copy. And that's, as I say, from 1988. And that's worth about £10. So it's a minor key issue. It's not from that long ago, but it's really nice condition. Makes it a little bit valuable. £10. And the last one is, I would say, is a key issue. And key issues, there would be some debate with this. Some people might see key issues just as, say, for example, the first appearance of Captain America, or you know, something really, really significant. Now, in my opinion, this is still a key issue, but I don't have, in my little semi-rural geekery, I don't have a copy of Action Comics #1 to show you. But I do have a nice mid-60s copy of Amazing Spider-Man. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 39. It's a pence price copy. It was published in 1966. That is an iconic thing, is it not? It's not an amazing condition. It's kind of very good minus. So it's got some wear along the spine. But it's complete, it's flat, it's clean. And that is a nice thing. Now, why is this a key issue? This is a key issue in American comics, because this is the comic in which Spider-Man and the Green Goblin first discover each other's secret identities. So that's quite an important thing to happen. That's kind of repeated in films and broader media. And it is also a key issue for another significant reason. It is the first artwork on Amazing Spider-Man by the one and only John Romita Sr. So that is a lovely thing, and is relatively valuable. I have put £100 on that comic. If you're interested. Yeah, brilliant. Well, hopefully, I'm going to wrap it up. Hopefully that's interesting for you guys, and thanks so much for watching. I do really appreciate it. If you want to follow this channel, it would be brilliant, and support my little one-man enterprise. That would be great. And if you're interested in my Facebook stuff, I do it all through my Daleks head of security page, who is called Dalek Zen. And you can send him a friend request if you want to talk to me or ask me anything. That'd be brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a nice day. And yeah, you take care. See you later. Bye.